Hey, book buddy friends, are you excited to dive back into Willa of the Wood? Because I know I was thrilled to pick up my copy and turn to chapter 69 so that I can find out what happened next. So I hope you are too. In my copy, it starts on page 343. So if you want to turn there with me, we'll get started now. Leaving Gretick to float down the river without her, Willa crawled up onto the rocky bank. The night air hung about her in a drifting haze of gray smoke and orange flickering light. That was when she noticed something dripping onto the ground. It was her own blood. Over the past few hours, she'd been speared in the neck, dragged on the floor, slammed against a wall, kicked in the side, and stepped on. Now that she'd come out of the cold water of the river and the all-consuming urgency of escape had faded behind her, her body began to hurt in places she didn't even realize could feel pain. Halia had bandaged the bloody wound on her neck, and the twisting roots of the floor had infused her body with the startling jolt of vital power. But she knew that she was losing too much blood. She couldn't make it very far in this wounded condition. She gazed up towards the burning lair. She didn't want to go back up there, but there was a chance that one area of the lair in particular had survived the fire and that it could help her. She climbed hand over hand up through the rocks and trees towards the blaze. She watched as the flames consumed one area after another, the crackling of the burning sticks and the rush of the fiery wind drowning out all else as the odor of burning wood filled the air. Do not say it out loud until you wish to destroy everything. Her mama's warning about saying Nylik echoed in her mind. Her old den, the great hall, the homes of all the Farron people were being destroyed by the fire. She couldn't help but feel the weight of it as she climbed. By the time she reached Dead Hollow, most of the lair had burned down into ruin, smoking piles of charred wreckage, the dry sticks of its old wall and floors providing ample fuel for its own destruction. Where once there had been a vast hive of twisted sticks, tunnels, and rooms, now there was nothing left but the blackened remains of disintegrating walls and heaps of smoldering ashes. All the Farron of the clan had fled the lair to escape the fire. So the entire area was abandoned, and most of what remained was unrecognizable. But there was one small part of the lair at the bottom of the gorge where the fire did not go, and that was what she was hoping for. She climbed through the ashes and debris until she reached the lowest, oldest part of the lair. She had been in this area just a few hours before with Gretick, but now it looked completely different. All the woven stick passageways and walls were burned away, and all that remained was the labyrinth of stone tunnels and ancient caves where she and her mama had lived. Willa climbed down inside and then made her way through the tunnel that led to her den, down the passageway with the painted figures of the Farron past. Despite the burning that had occurred above, the paintings on the stone walls had survived. She came to the River of Souls, thousands of hands touching the wall, her mother's and her father's, Aloa's and her own, and left and right, the forward and the back, all together. Willa and Aloa, she thought, remembering the strange human sounds. Good morning, sister, she said, touching her living hand to her sister's handprint as she walked by. I'm glad you made it through. Finally, Willa came to the den where her mama had raised her. Those areas of the floor that had been made out of woven sticks had burned and were gone, and the intense heat of the surrounding conflagration had melted and destroyed their cocoons and all their belongings. Most of the small trees and other plants that her mama had nurtured in the small circles of light were wilted from the heat and dead. All except one. The little tree was still alive. She sighed with happiness and smiled. It was sitting in the stone pot on the stone ledge, protected and safe in its little niche. It was an ancient tree, miniature in size, its small branches gnarled with age, but its tiny leaves were green with living spirit. Her heart warmed to see that the little tree was waiting for her. "Hello, my friend," she said as she moved closer. "I know it's probably been difficult to breathe these last few hours, but don't worry. I'll get you someplace safe with plenty of light and water and nutrients." She took several of the leaves that had fallen from the tree and pressed them to the wound at her neck. The relief from pain was immediate. She felt the intense power of the tiny plant surging into her skin, through her muscles, and deep down into her blood. One by one, she treated the most painful of her wounds. "Thank you, Mama," she whispered softly, "not just for nurturing and protecting the little tree all those years, not just for teaching her how to use it and for the many other gifts of the mind that she'd given her, but for the love that had come with it. Protect it. Hold on to it." Her mama had pleaded with her before she died. Willa hadn't understood at the time, but she knew now that her mama wasn't telling her to hold on to the little tree, or to the secret of Nilik's forbidden name, or even to the ancient lore of the forest. She was imploring her to hold on to what was in her heart, her love, her compassion, her sense of her soul, not just her instinct to blend, but sometimes her willingness to stand up and make herself known, to throw the spear, to spring the trap, and to set things in motion that cannot be undone. Her mama had been watching the decline of the Dead Hollow clan for many years, and Willa came to realize that her mama already knew that the Dead Hollow clan hadn't started dying because of the arrival of the Day folk, but with the rise of the Patarian who came after, the quelling of the Farron words, the disconnection from the forest, the drowning of love and compassion and sympathy in a swarm of fear and malice and control. Without love, there could be no families, no children, no elders. There could be no future. As she held the little tree, she came to a realization, something that she didn't think she could have understood before. For years, her mama had been unable to fight against the growing power of the Patarian and his control of the Farron people. To go against him meant death. Willa realized now that she hadn't had been her Willa realized now that she herself had been her mama's last try. She was her last hope to live and to love and to follow the path of the heart. "I'll protect it, Mama. I swear I will. I'll protect what's in my heart," Willa whispered in the old language. "I'll never let it go." Willa carried the little tree slowly up and out of the stone tunnels and walked through the ashes until she reached what was once the center of the Dead Hollow lair. She looked around her at the vast gray field of ashes. Her premonition that she would never see again the hall of the Patarian, the hall of the glittering birds, had been correct. The once magnificent walls of the great hall had burned and crumbled down. The hall wasn't just emptied or damaged, it was gone. The great throne of the Patarian had burned into a charred, blackened heap. She stepped slowly forward into the area that had been behind the throne. She began to make out a dark shape on the ground. It was burned and blackened, but she could see the outline of what was once a leg and the oblong mass of a scorched and smoldering head. The knees and elbows were folded up to the chest. The person had died cowering in fear. A sickening feeling crept into Willa's chest. It was the dead body of the Patarian. The charred bones of his gripping fingers were still clinging to a spear of power. She had run into his private rooms and blockaded his doors to protect his precious human-made objects from the hands of the mob. He had gathered the looking glass and the other human-made things all around him, coveting them to the very end. He was so frightened of losing control of them that he would not leave even as the smoke and fire came. The spear of power and the other metal objects had survived the fire, but he had not. She stared at what was left of her uncle for several seconds, and then she turned away. As she made her way out of the burned wreckage of the lair for the last time, she found a spot in the center of the destruction. She knelt down, dug into the ashes and dirt with her hands, and planted the tree into the ground. I know, you don't want me to leave you here, she said gently, but you just wait and see. You'll like this new spot when the sun rises and the rain comes and the ashes wash down into the rivers. There will be plenty for your roots to grow into. After a few moments sitting with the little tree, she rose and started to walk away. She took a few steps and then she stopped and turned and looked back at the tree, sitting so small and frail in the ashes all alone. Maybe you don't have to wait, she thought. Maybe I can give you a little bit of a head start, help you out, like you always did for me. She walked back over to the little tree and knelt down in the ashes in front of it. Then she touched her fingers to the tree's tiny roots and trunk, and she closed her eyes. At first, nothing happened, but then she began to softly sing the song that her mama had taught her when she was 6 years old, the night her parents and sister died. The roots of the tree began to extend, reaching down into the ashes. That's it, little one, she whispered. Keep coming. As the roots pulled the nutrients from the ashes of the past, the tree began to grow, its branches reaching upward and spreading outward, the leaves unfurling bright and green, and the trunk thickening as it reached towards the sky. It was a song of death and a song of life, of growth and rebirth, with words as ancient as the mist-filled forest. Soon the tree had grown as tall as she was, with its branches as wide and as outstretched as her arms. That's it, little one, keep coming, she said again, and the tree kept growing. It grew and grew until the trunk was thick and the branches strong, and the leaves reaching far above her. Willa smiled as the energy of the tree flowed through her body and her heart, and her own power flowed through the tree. And the moment she smiled, the branches above her head curled and turned and brightened into the shape of glittering flying birds, glowing with the bounty of blue ghost fireflies, their sparkling abundance reaching to the glistening starlit heavens above. She was sculpting like the Faron of old. When she was finally done, the magnificent glowing tree stood more than 100 feet tall in the center of the ashen devastation that had once been Dead Hollow, the moon shining down through its branches and lighting up the world around her. Willa looked up at the tree and smiled with happiness. Well, it's a good start, little one, a very good start indeed, she said, her heart overflowing. I think you've got it from here. And only then, with the little tree settled into its new home, did she rise from her knees and walk away. And with that, we'll stop at the end of chapter 69, only to continue our adventures in Willa of the Wood next time. Look forward to seeing you then.